Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
You know, it's Advent. It's almost Christmas. It's Christmas Eve as I'm broadcasting this to you. And you would think that the bishops would take some time off from their new favorite subject to regale us with. It used to be that the church in America was focused on the issue of sacrificing the most vulnerable, the youngest, or the elderly, to Moloch, living sacrifices for convenience and economic benefit. And they would rightfully point out that not only was evil, it was like the preeminent evil social issue of our time. They don't do that anymore. They've officially announced that immigration was now the preeminent social issue of our time. And you would think that here we are, just a few days before Christmas, as from when these articles were posted, that I'll go over with you, that they would say, hey, you know, maybe there are other issues we should be talking about, or maybe we should be teaching the world about what Christmas actually is about and what it is we celebrate on that day and the reason for the season, as they say. But no, they're actually they're stoking fear over immigration. So we go here to Catholic World Report, where you're going to see them stoke fear at the same time that the new head of the U.S. bishops, Archbishop Coakley, has said that he basically thinks he's going to get personal meetings with the President of the United States on this. I doubt that's going to happen. I'd be surprised if it did, because you're out there stoking fear about the man. You're probably not insulting people and making it sound like he's like the great Satan or something. You're probably not going to get too many personal meetings with the man. The headline from Catholic World Report, updated. Florida bishops call for immigration enforcement moratorium over Christmas. Now, what do they mean by Christmas? Do they mean Christmas Day? Probably not. They probably mean a vague sort of combination of secular Christmas and all the way through the Epiphany. And that wasn't going to happen. You're probably not going to see too much enforcement on Christmas Day. We are talking about federal employees, after all. But otherwise, calling for a moratorium on this was a ridiculous ask. It really is. Here are the details, though. The bishops of the Catholic Church in Florida have asked President Donald Trump and Governor Ron DeSantis, quote, to pause immigration enforcement activities during the Christmas holidays. We request that the government pause apprehension and roundup activities during Christmas season. Such a pause would show a decent regard for the humanity of these families, the bishop said in a December 22nd statement. Don't be the Grinch that stole Christmas, Archbishop Thomas Walensky of Miami said in a news conference. Pro tip, I laugh. Okay, but pro tip, Archbishop, if you're going to talk about something as serious as immigration enforcement, and you occupy a post that is apostolic in nature, if you were to trace your lineage back far enough, you would find an apostle. Perhaps you should treat this issue with the deadly seriousness that it has. Don't invoke the Grinch. It says, give people these 2 weeks to be with their families without fear of being arrested or taken into custody and ending up at Alligator Alcatraz or at Chrome or other places to await deportation. Abigail Jackson, a White House spokesperson, said President Trump was elected on his promise to the American people to deport criminal illegal aliens, and he's keeping that promise. Along with Walensky, other prelates, including Bishop Gerald Barbarito of Palm Beach, Bishop Frank DeWayne of Venice, Bishop John Noonan of Orlando, Bishop Gregory Parks of St. Petersburg, Bishop William Wack of Pensacola, Bishop Eric Pohlmeyer of St. Augustine, and Auxiliary Bishop Enrique El Delgado of Miami joined in issuing the statement. Pausing enforcement during the holy season can lower the temperature within our partisan divisions, ease the fear and anxiety present in many of our immigrant and even non-immigrant families, and allow all of us to celebrate with greater joy the advent of the Prince of Peace, they wrote. Now is not the time to be callous towards the suffering caused by immigrant enforcement. Our nation is richly blessed. Despite challenges confronting our nation, we Americans enjoy peace and prosperity that is the envy of the world, made possible by our special constitutional order which protects our liberties. End quote. Now it goes on to talk about how people who were not criminals have been rounded up. You got to remember something here. We're talking about entering the country illegally, breaking immigration laws, which makes one a criminal. So on the face, that claim doesn't make any sense. But the bishops have elsewhere, recently in the last several days, talked about how natural people, actual American citizens, born American citizens, are afraid of being rounded up and deported. It's, of course, nonsense. That's not happening. But they are stoking that fear. And which is why it's also most curious where you get this. Because the rhetoric out of the U.S. bishops has been irresponsible and frankly partisan. They never invoke the Democrats or the Republicans, but it's a very partisan approach they're taking here. That's why it's most curious when you get this story here from Catholic News Agency published on the same day on the headline, Archbishop Coakley anticipates meeting with Trump and Vance. Well, he might be waiting a while, but we shall see. Maybe I'm wrong on that. He says he's claiming he's looking forward to speaking with him in the near future. Again, doubtful. Here's what he has to say. Coakley was elected president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in November, said he has not had any personal conversations with Trump or Vice President J.D. Vance, but anticipates engaging with them over matters of mutual concern. When Coakley meets the administration, undoubtedly the question of immigration is going to come up, he said in an interview on CBS News' Face the Nation on December 21st. I think we have opportunities to work together. We have opportunities to speak frankly with one another. In regard to immigration, Coakley said there's a lot of anxiety among migrants, but the situation varies from place to place, he said. In communities with a more dense migrant population, there's a great deal of fear and uncertainty because of the level of rhetoric that is often employed when addressing issues around migration and the threats of deportation. While some bishops have formally granted mass dispensation for immigrants who fear being targeted by immigration and customs enforcement at Mass, Coakley said there has not been substantial declines in Mass attendance. Coakley, who serves as Archbishop of Oklahoma City, said he has not seen declines in the area and has not heard of it reported widely from his brother bishops. In other words, migrants aren't really that afraid of being taken at Mass. Why? Because they're not coming into your masses to do this. I know that this is the case in some places, but I don't think it's as common, at least here locally or in places that I have personal contact with. There's an anxiety, there's a fear, but I don't think it's kept people away in great numbers. In the USCCB special message on immigration released in November, the bishop said, "We oppose the indiscriminate mass deportation of people. We pray for an end to the dehumanizing rhetoric and violence, whether directed at immigrants or at law enforcement." The bishop's message also said human dignity and national security are not in conflict. Coakley reaffirmed the bishop's message and said treating all people with respect and dignity is a foundational bedrock for Christians. There's no conflict necessarily between advocating for safe and secure borders and treating people with respect and dignity. We'll always have to treat people with dignity, God-given dignity. The state doesn't award it, and the state can't take it away. It's from the Creator. Whether people are documented or undocumented, whether they are here legally or illegally, they don't forfeit their human dignity, he says. I don't think we can ever say that the end justifies the means. Treat everyone with respect of the human dignity of the person. And then he repeats this piece of propaganda here. As Americans, we must remember we are a nation of immigrants ourselves, and we are founded upon the immigrant experience, Coakley said. We have a right and duty to respect sovereign borders of a state, but we also have a responsibility to welcome migrants, he said. This is a fundamental principle in Catholic social teaching regarding immigration and migration. End quote. There's also a fundamental principle in the Catholic teaching on the issue in general, and that fundamental principle is, of course, that the government can determine who is allowed to come to the country in the first place or not. The government has every right to declare a total moratorium, total ban on anyone entering the country legally if it wanted to. And there is growing push for that. Americans are tired, very, very tired of this. That wouldn't make it right, of course, but it wouldn't necessarily make it wrong either. And this is kind of what the bishop is getting at there. There's been talk from the U.S. bishops that there needs to be a fundamental reform of immigration policy. Now, if you've heard that line before, it should be familiar, because Democrats have been saying that for 30 years, my entire adult life, probably most of your adult life too, if you're older than I am. They've been calling for a fundamental reform top down. They want to let virtually anybody who wants to come in to enter the country with few, if any, restrictions. That's what they want. Will they get it? Not with this president, obviously. Maybe the next one, whether that's J.D. Vance or just as likely a Democrat. The media are trying to push the idea that AOC or Kamala Harris are having can beat J.D. Vance in the next presidential election. If that were to happen, do you think that they would push Congress for fundamental immigration reform? And do you think the U.S. bishops would sternly oppose a Ocasio-Cortez presidency on moral issues? She's a self-professed Catholic, by the way, with the same urgency that they oppose the Trump administration on immigration. I wouldn't take that bet if I was the type to actually be a betting man. In fact, I'm not someone who would wager money, but in this case, I would almost be willing to wager money that they will go back to being mostly silent, like they were under Joe Biden, because that's how they do things. But I'm very curious what you think about this. And just let me know in the comments. Again, keeping it pretty short today. It's Christmas Eve. I may not even go live stream tomorrow, but let me know your thought on this. The U.S. bishops are stoking fear. That's what they're doing. That's what they're very, very good at doing. And it's strange to watch. By Archbishop Coakley's own admission, at least in Oklahoma City and in a lot of other dioceses, there hasn't been a noticeable mass attendance drop among migrant communities. Why is that? Because the U.S. law enforcement agencies involved, local and federal, aren't going after people going to mass. The government has said they're willing to go into church buildings if needed when the churches start doing things like sheltering those who shouldn't be in the country in the first place, but they're not going to masses. Maybe that's why. Maybe the migrants know this. But let me know what you think about all this in the comments, please. As Laura says in the live chat, I'm married to an immigrant and we had to pay thousands of dollars. It was not easy to get him to Canada, Irish too. Right, and that's the other thing about this. America's immigration laws are very, very permissive. They're very, very liberal, very open, much more so than Mexico's or Canada's or anybody else. Although Canada is a sieve right now, you could just waltz into the country and they'll tolerate you. But if you want to immigrate there from certain other places, it's very difficult. Turns out most other countries, at least on paper, have more stringent rules than America's on paper rules. But those who in question, who we're talking about, didn't come in legally. Otherwise, they don't have anything to worry about leaving unless they overstayed their welcome. Another issue itself. As Kane points out in the chat, we just had a big fear-motivated attack in Australia. The one thing missing is talking about immigration. And the media and politicians talking about 2A related issues. Can't talk about certain things on YouTube. They come down like the wrath of God on you for using certain words. But he's right, broadly speaking. I've been paying attention to that story. They're not going after the fact that the person was not an Australian, was not an Aussie there. They're going after the tool instead of the tool user, and that's a problem. Very curious what you thought about this, though, so let me know in the comments, please. And like and subscribe if you haven't, because it does help. Share this on social media, it helps too. It is Christmas Eve. Pre-Vatican II was a day often dedicated to fasting and abstinence and such, and the church does not require that of people anymore, but it's always worthwhile to at least consider doing things the way they used to be done, the way things that all of our ancestors in the faith did. So consider it if you are able to. Obviously, if you've got things you're going to do with family who aren't Catholic today, it might be a little difficult to do. But let me know in general in the comments maybe what you're going to do for Advent today, as always, or for New Year's or Christmas Eve rather. Otherwise, let me know in the comments. Hey, like and subscribe if you have. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.